On August 21st, 2003, I told God that I hated him. And I meant it. With my entire heart, I meant it. When I told him, I was by myself in the storage closet of our basement. I had run in there not knowing where to go after two of my friends showed up at my door to tell me that my friend Tyler was just found dead at his work. He had waited for the rest of the employees to go home before he did it, but it was his father, who was staying a little later to catch up on work, that found him. In that moment, nothing made sense. I had just spent hours with him the night before, after he threw some pebbles at my bedroom window and asked if he could come up and watch a movie and sleep at our house before heading to work in the morning. He never asked for permission. Our door was always unlocked, and in our neighborhood it was understood that our house was always available if one of my friends needed a place to sleep, some food from the refrigerator, or just some time to be by themselves. But that night, he asked to come in. And I said, of course. And then Tyler and I watched an old James Bond movie on TV until I fell asleep. And then he woke me up to tell me that he was going to go back home and sleep in his own bed. And then he hugged me. And then he told me he loved me. And then I never saw him again. So in that storage closet, as I sat tucked between boxes of old clothes and dust-covered books, trying my best to catch my breath in between the tears that ran so quickly I thought that they were going to drown me, I thought of my friend. I thought of him hugging me, of him telling me that he loved me, and I thought of never being able to hug him again. About the hole that now existed in my life where my friend of my entire childhood once lived. I thought of how unfair it was. I thought of how stupid it was. I thought of how cruel and of how pointless it was. And then I turned my blame to the only place that made sense. And I told God that I was furious, that I was devastated, that I hated him. For the next hours, the next days, the next months, God and I had it out. There was a lot of yelling, some passive aggression, some aggressive aggression, and a lot of just pure, profound sadness. And though that time in my life was one of the most difficult and painful, I carry it with me today as a living paradox, because through my tears, through my depression, through the anger of losing my friend, I feel like for the first time in my life, I truly prayed. It didn't look like the prayer that I knew. It didn't look like Kol Nidrei. It didn't sound like Adon Olam. It sounded like crying, like shouting, like punching walls and lots of nights without sleeping. But somehow at the same time, I knew that it sounded like prayer. And I also know now that it's important for me to speak about that prayer tonight, because this spiritual uncertainty has shown up in my office, through many phone calls, and in my inbox more than you would imagine since I became a rabbi. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart to hear so many incredible and spiritually beautiful congregants tell me that they feel they don't belong at synagogue because they aren't in a good place. That they have no business talking to God because they are angry with God, because they feel let down by God, because they question their relationship with God, or if they should even have that relationship at all. It breaks my heart that synagogue feels to so many like it has a velvet rope at the front door, and only the faithful, the joyful, and the content are meant to be allowed in. Before the high holidays, I sat down with someone who told me that they'd rather sit these ones out this year. And when I asked why, they told me that they were angry, that life has never stopped and that it has been one thing after another, and it has brought them to a point where they wanted to shout, "Enough!" And I get it. I do. But I also know that there is no better time to be in synagogue, no better time to open up the pathway to prayer than when we are filled to the point of bursting and when our hearts need some answers. That it's okay to shout enough. That it's right to shout enough. Somewhere along the line of our great tradition, we were told that there's no place in tefillah, no place in prayer for emotion. At least not any expression of our emotion. That we are expected to sit here with an expected decorum, with our hands folded politely in our laps, our backs straight and our voices vocal but not too loud. We understand that at certain times we should sit and at other times we're supposed to stand, but God forbid we sit when we're supposed to stand or we stand when we're supposed to sit. As if the only way that God can hear us is if we are wearing suits and ties or dresses and heels and speaking Hebrew with modern Israeli Sephardic pronunciation. But we are people. We are people who carry with us all the complexity that comes from simply being. We have hearts that long to sing a million different songs that speak to who we are and what we need. Some of us in this room are hurting. Some of us are in deep and terrifying sadness. Some of us are lost and have no idea where to go. Some of us are angry. And some of us are rejoicing. But all of us are filled with a longing, whether we are aware of it or not, to speak and to be heard. That is what makes us people. That is why God made us people. And that is why God loves us for being people. That declaration of our humanity, that cry, that is prayer. And when we speak our prayer to God, we owe it to ourselves, and we also owe it to the one who spoke and the world came into being, to cry out with the honesty and the pathos deserving of this beautiful and holy relationship. Because this covenant is a marriage. It is the oldest marriage in the world. And like any marriage, it sometimes makes mistakes. But it also relies on a pulse of honesty and trust, of sometimes painful and difficult sincerity. Because without putting our whole hearts into it, it can never truly blossom into the symbiotic harmony that it is meant to be. And so it's up to us. It's up to us to buck that conception of what is appropriate and what is expected, and to speak from the depths of who we are and what we are feeling. When God lets us down, we don't have a right to get angry with him. We have an obligation to get angry with him. When we feel abandoned, we have an obligation to ask God a line that he himself uses when addressing his partner called Israel throughout the Torah, Ayecha, where are you? And when we feel blessed, when we feel that we have been gifted with the beauty of life and with the splendor of a world filled with goodness and love, then we are equally obligated to rejoice, to sing, and to dance, because joy is also a part of being human. And it deserves to be expressed and sent all the way to the heavens, where it can be celebrated by the Creator as well. A structure and a framework of prayer might rest on the pages of our Sidurim and on our Machzorim. But the life and the fire of prayer lives through the expression of our hearts. And even if we learn every word of Hebrew, even if we memorize every melody and every trope mark, if our words aren't honest, if they don't carry sparks of our souls within them, then how can our marriage flourish? this Yom Kippur, we are not expected to know every word of the liturgy. We aren't being tested on our choreography during the Amidah or on our Hebrew proficiency. We are simply being called by God to open our hearts and to respond with whatever that fire needs to say. We are asked to be human, to cry if we need to cry, to shout if we need to shout, to sing if we need to sing, and to dance if we need to dance. We are asked to wrap ourselves up in our talitot and be by ourselves if we need to be by ourselves in prayer. And we are asked to hug the people sitting next to us, those people that we love so dearly, because their hearts are filled with love and an expression and a song that they need to sing to. We are asked to be Israel, to be the spouse of the divine, and to uphold the words of our ketubah, our sacred marriage document that we authored together thousands of years ago when we promised to be who we are, when we promised to give and receive so that we may complement one another and make each other better, when we promised to pray even when praying is the hardest thing that we can do. There is a beautiful Hasidic story that takes place right after the horrors of the Shoah. A Chassid comes to his Rebbe right after Yom Kippur and with dread in his eyes says to his teacher, "My Rebbe, I have to speak to you for my heart is heavy with guilt." "Go on," the Rebbe says. "Tell me what's making you feel so guilty." On Yom Kippur, on the great day of atonement, the Chassid says, "I entered into prayer, and while speaking with God, I began to say the Al-Chet, and I began to strike my chest and to take ownership of my sins from this past year. But then I stopped. And I said to God, you know what? Yeah, I have sinned. But my sins this year have been some minor transgressions. You, however, are guilty of grievous sins. You have taken babies away from their mother, and you have taken mothers away from their babies. I'll tell you what, I'll forgive you, you forgive me, and we'll call it even." When the Chassid finishes speaking, the Rebbe wipes tears away from his eyes and responds, "Why did you let God off the hook so easily? With that argument, you could have redeemed all of Israel." For the next 25 hours, we're going to speak to God, and we're going to listen. We might cry. We might have to walk out of this room and take some time for ourselves. And at the same time, without any paradox or without any seeming paradox, we might laugh. We might sing as loud as our voices will let us, and we might want to dance. We do not bear the responsibility of redeeming all of Israel, but we do bear the responsibility of being true to our hearts. To closing our eyes and opening our souls to the power of this holy day as it washes over us, and to try, to really try. We are people who feel lost, who feel anger and sorrow, who struggle, who hope, who dream. And our God is called Adonai, Adonai El Rahum V'Chanun, God of compassion and grace. God who doesn't forsake us when our humanity shows, but Dafka listens even more attentively. Who cries when we cry, who suffers when we suffer, who has gone into exile with us no matter where it may take us. And if it doesn't feel that way, well, then it's time to let God know. And you can let him know here, because this is your home. Here there are no velvet ropes, no VIP lists or liturgical expectations, only open doors and outstretched arms ready to catch you should you fall. Feel what you need to feel. Speak the words you need to speak. And with our hearts on fire, may this Yom Kippur bring us to know the depths of who we are. May we learn, may we grow, may we find comfort, And may we pray.